Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I wanted to talk about and show you guys the first army to win a grand tournament in 9th edition. This event was hosted by Vanguard Tactics, who I heard did an amazing job running the event and making the event meet certain standards to make the event as safe as possible during this worldwide pandemic. From what I've heard and from the pictures I've seen, all the players were wearing masks and made sure to keep their distance from one another and pretty much took all the precautions necessary for the time that we are currently living in. So kudos to the event organizers and the players for working together to make sure this was a fun and safe event for everyone. With that said though, let's get into what you guys and gals clicked on the video for, and let's get into the list that won the first GT of 9th edition. So the army was a Salamanders successor chapter, using the traits Stealthy and Long Range Marksman. It went 5 wins and 1 loss, and its only loss was to Adeptus Custodes. The pilot was Alex Harrison, who is one of the top players in the world, and I actually did an interview with him yesterday, and he was able to shed some light on some of his thoughts when creating his list, and he also gave me some insight on his tactics and some thoughts about 9th edition in general. So here's his list, and afterwards I'll go over his thoughts behind each unit he added, and also the tactics he used with those units to win his games. So we have a patrol detachment, which features a captain on bike that has a Thunderhammer Storm Shield, a unit of 5 intercessors with assault bolters, a unit of 5 scouts, 3 with bolt guns, 2 with bolt pistol and close combat weapon, 2 units of aggressors, 1 5-man with the bolt gun gauntlets, and 6 aggressors with the flamestorm gauntlets, a unit of outriders, a Landspeeder Tempest, a Devastator squad with grav cannons and an Armorium Cherub, with a drop pod to deliver the Devastator squad. We also have a Spearhead detachment, which features a lieutenant with jump pack that has a bolt pistol, close combat weapon, and a relic, 3 more aggressors that are flamestorm gauntlets, 3 units of the new Eradicators, and a Relic Scorpius whirlwind. So getting into his list building strategy, Alex has the same beliefs as myself when it comes to making a good tournament winning list. And that is that you should try to minimize the amount of secondary points your army gives up, while including units that are dedicated to getting certain secondaries no matter what. So what's easily noticed about this list is that it doesn't really give up secondaries for things like Bring It Down. But what's a bit harder to notice is that this list is actually incredibly good at maxing out 2 different secondaries, those being Engage on All Fronts and While We Stand We Fight. Engage on All Fronts is basically the new version of the Recon secondary from the ITC missions of 8th edition. You just need a different unit in all 4 table quadrants to score some points. This is where the Outriders, the Landspeeder Tempest, the Drop Pod and the Devastators, and the unit of 3 Flamestorm Aggressors get to shine. The Outriders and the Landspeeder is pretty self-explanatory. They are fast and can easily get to different table quadrants, especially on the new smaller size board. The Drop Pod and the Grav Devs can come in another quadrant as well if needed, although to be honest their main purpose is just to shoot stuff off the table. And the unit of 3 Aggressors were always put into strategic reserves every game, so they could just pop out somewhere if needed as well and get those recon points while flaming a few units. On top of that, the majority of the rest of the army is pretty beefy infantry. They're mostly toughness 5, 3 wounds, and a 2+ save because of the stealthy trait. They also have a 6+ feel no pain because of the relic that's on the lieutenant. So the rest of this army could easily move up and take control of the center of the board, and then move out the units accordingly depending on what quadrant is needed to get those recon points, or I guess engage on all front points. And for the other secondary choice that Alex went with every game, it was While We Stand We Fight. That secondary makes you pick the 3 most expensive models in your army, not units, but most expensive models in your army. And if those models survive to the end of the game, you get 5 points per model to max out that secondary. The targets in this list are the Bike Captain, the Jump Pack Lieutenant, and the Whirlwind Scorpius, and this was on purpose. The Whirlwind is a pretty good pickup for this, because it just sits back all game behind a wall, and only really gets dealt with if the opponent has their own artillery that can shoot out of line of sight. But with all the points hikes in the game to artillery, those units aren't really being spammed anymore, making the Scorpius a safe bet to survive the entire game. The Lieutenant has a bunch of tough bodies to hide behind, so it's pretty hard to get him as well, and the Bike Captain takes a Warlord trait that makes him toughness 7 and a relic to force the enemy to subtract 1 from their wound rolls against him. Plus he has a 3+ invulnerable, so the dude is insanely hard to take down on his own, and that's not even including that he's a character and he can hide behind other units if needed. On top of that, Salamanders have a cheeky stratagem to roll a dice when a character dies, and on a 4+ that character gets back up from the dead. So if for some reason one of those characters did die, if Alex had the command points for it, it was sometimes worth taking that 50-50 chance to get those 5 extra points at the end of the game, since While We Stand We Fight is scored at the end of the game. So that's it for the unit choices when it came to secondaries. So let's go through the list once again and go over each unit individually and what its purpose in the list was. So we have already covered the bike captain, but again to summarize, he's a great beat stick that is stupidly durable, great for scoring while we stand we fight, but also a good reroll bot and countercharge unit since you'll want to play defensively with him since you're relying on him to get yourself 5 victory points at the end of the game. For the troops, we have a unit of intercessors and a unit of scouts. Alex said that if he could go back, he'd actually take 2 units of scouts instead of the intercessors because the scouts fit better with his overall strategy of the list when it comes to scoring primary points. So the scouts get deployed mid-board on top of an objective but out of line of sight of the opponent. This means the opponent has to go out of their way to remove those scouts, or they concede that objective that the scouts are on to the Salamanders player for pretty much the rest of the game, which will usually result in the Salamander player holding more objectives and winning on the primary, since the rest of the army is incredibly good at walking up the board and controlling the center objectives. So with 2 units of scouts, this strategy would be even better. For the elite choices in the army, we have the unit of 5 Boltstorm Aggressors, a unit of 6 Flamestorm Aggressors, and another unit of 3 Flamestorm Aggressors. The small unit of Aggressors always went into Strategic Reserve, and because of the long-range marksman trait, they were able to pop out and actually be in range to hit stuff with their Flamers. Salamanders also have a great combo with these guys. You spend 1 command point so that the unit counts as not having moved, which triggers the aggressor's natural ability to shoot twice. Then you have another stratagem to get max shots on their flamers, so 36 hits times 2 for 72 auto hits, and when in the tactical doctrine, so basically turns 2 and 3, the flamers get +1 to their wound rolls because of the Salamander's bonus for being in the tactical doctrine. Even with just 3 aggressors, this combo can be devastating, and enough to scare the opponent into trying to screen out the aggressors on their table edges, which usually leaves enough room in the middle of the board for the drop pod to come in and let the grav devs do their thing, which I'll talk about in a minute when we get to the grav devs. The other 2 bigger units of aggressors, however, normally walked up the board or advanced up the board and either hid behind some walls to better their position for the next turn, or they moved up and advanced and shot the opponent. This actually works on the new board size as well, because it's so much smaller than it was in 8th edition. So it's much easier for slow units like this that don't really have too big of a range to actually get their shots in, or for them to just be able to hide and get a better position for the following turn. With long range marksmen as well, the flame aggressors have a 19-inch threat range on average with their advance, which covers a decent amount on the new board. And in this edition, where controlling the center of the board is key to winning, your opponent usually makes the aggressors' jobs easier since they're going to get closer to you because they want to take control of the center as well. These guys also have a 2+ save in this list because of the stealthy trait, so even when you do pop out from hiding behind a wall, you're going to have a 2+ armor save, as long as the opponent doesn't have something like ignores cover. These units will also have a 6+ feel no pain because of the lieutenant with the relic right behind them, so they're pretty damn durable for being infantry. Also, by keeping these 2 big units together, the Boltstorm Aggressors and the Flamestorm Aggressors, it allowed for some really good defense against charges from melee armies, because of the stratagem Born Protectors. So if the opponent wanted to be cheeky and charge the Boltstorm Aggressors because the Flamers in Overwatch can be pretty devastating, the Flamestorm ones can actually Overwatch for the Boltstorm ones because of that stratagem Born Protectors. And then after that Flamestorm unit is done Overwatching for the other unit, those aggressors can actually heroically intervene up to 2d6 inches with their power fists and get some smacking done on the opponent. It's a very good defensive combo against melee armies. And one last thing to note about the aggressors, Alex said in matchups where the opponent had scary blast weapons, he would combat squad the 6-man aggressor squad so that he didn't allow his opponent to get more shots for free. Moving on to the fast attack units. For the Outriders, not really much to say about this unit other than they're fast, they can reliably get you engaged on all fronts, and they have some decent shooting and melee potential. The Landspeeder Tempest was also included for similar reasons as the Outriders. It's fairly cheap, can get engaged on all fronts pretty easily, and it has some decent DECA. Moving on to the heavy support, we have the Devastators and a drop pod. This unit is kind of like the Ultramarine Grav Devastators, but this unit in Salamanders can actually get an extra +1 to wound. So the combo is to drop them in the center of the board on turn 2 or 3, pay 1 command point to have them count as if they haven't moved, give them rerolls from your bike chapter master preferably, use the Grav stratagem to reroll wounds and damage, and use another Salamander stratagem called Crucible of Battle to give them +1 to wound. So with all that together, you have all of these Grav shots hitting on 3s, rerolling any hit rolls, wounding most of their preferred targets on either 3+ or 4+, while rerolling those wound rolls, and rerolling their random D3 damage. This combo is incredibly potent and can kill much more than you'd expect for such a cheap unit. Then we have the 3 units of the new Eradicators, which I assume when everyone first saw them probably said to themselves that unit would be good in Salamanders. And sure enough, they are. Alex even said that this unit is so good that he would consider using them in other chapters as well. So these guys are toughness 5, 3 wounds, and a 2+ save because of stealthy, so they're pretty beefy and fit in with the rest of the army being pretty much the same stat line. Their weapons are also assault and a 27-inch range because of long-range marksman, meaning they have a threat range of about 35 inches on average if they advance. Pretty nutty, especially with a chapter master nearby for those rerolls. In Salamanders as well, during the tactical doctrines, so turn 2 and 3, they get +1 to wound with their meltas. So they're wounding most things in the game on 2+ at AP -5 with 6 damage a pop. And with their ability to shoot twice at the same target, that's 6 shots from each unit, which can basically delete a lot of medium-sized vehicles or elite units pretty easily. So overall, a great unit for Space Marines in general, but even better in Salamanders. And then last but not least, we have one Relic Scorpius. This unit is pretty self-explanatory. It sits back behind a wall, shoots stuff with a ton of firepower, and scores you 5 victory points if it lives at the end of the game, if you take while we stand, we fight. And that's pretty much it for the units and their explanation. The only thing that I don't know if I mentioned, but just in case if I didn't, this army really relies on being able to run up the board and use terrain to its benefit. So like benefiting from the obscuring rule, being able to hide and then pop out through the terrain to be able to shoot the opponent on the following turn. It's incredibly good at controlling the center of the board because nobody wants to walk into the range of 6 Flamestorm Aggressors that are hiding behind a wall. And then on top of that, the army is actually incredibly good in melee as well, considering the fact that all the Aggressors have basically power fists. You have the Smash Captain in there as well. The Intercessors can do a decent chunk in melee, and even the Eradicators get a decent amount of attacks as well. The army is also incredibly durable, having that 2+ save at all times, whether they're in terrain or not in terrain because of the stealthy trait. And they have some incredibly good defensive and offensive combos with the Salamander specific stratagems. So with that said, with all things considered, some side notes that definitely contribute to this army list win at the event is that this event, from what I saw, looked a little heavy on terrain. For example, here's a picture of one of the boards. This event also still used the ITC house rule, the bottom floor of ruins blocks line of sight, on top of using the obscuring rule as well. The argument they had for using this house rule on top of the obscuring rule was that terrain with bases don't really accomplish what the obscuring rule wants to accomplish, and obscuring is only really good enough if you play with terrain that doesn't have a base, because then it's a lot easier to hide your units rather than having them have to sit outside of the base in order to be hidden. Like, it's a really wonky interaction that I talk about in this video that I'm showing on screen right now. So if you want to hear more about that, then go watch that video after this. But yeah, that was the reason for also using that Frontline Gaming or ITC house rule. And to be honest, I definitely agree with it. When using terrain that looks like that in terrains that have a base, I still do kind of feel like the bottom floor of ruins should still just block line of sight. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more Warhammer 40k content like this. Also, if you're a fan of the channel and you're enjoying the content that I produce, I'd like to ask that you consider becoming a patron and help out the channel monetarily. I'm hoping to get a studio up sometime this year, which requires a lot of funds, and I could definitely use some help in accomplishing that goal so that I can start producing stuff like battle reports and other content on top of the usual content that I produce. So if that's something that you'd like to see from this channel, then make sure to check out the Patreon page and consider making a pledge. The link for the Patreon page is in the description of this video. With that said, thanks to all my past and current patrons. You guys and gals are awesome, and I love you all. And also, thanks to you regular viewers as well. Without you, the channel wouldn't be where it's at today, and I'm very glad that you guys enjoy my content. And also, thanks to Alex for doing that interview with me and shedding some light on his list for this video. And I guess that's it for the video. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy wargaming.